So we'll go ahead and get started. Sorry if I seem a little distracted. I'm also letting people in the room, but like I mentioned, my name is Blair Murphy, and I'm currently the acting executive director at Arlington Arts Center. Until a couple weeks ago, I was the curator of exhibitions, so curating our exhibitions and working with all of the artists that we show. I'm really happy to be here this evening with three of our SOLOS 2020 artists. SOLOS 2020 is the current exhibition in our main gallery spaces. So it was very exciting. At the end of September, we did reopen to the public, and especially really appreciate all the artists whose work we're showing right now and all the work they've done to make these shows happen under some pretty, unexpected for everyone's circumstances. If you haven't had a chance to come see the exhibitions, like I mentioned, we do have public gallery hours right now. We're open Wednesday through Saturday from 12 to 5. You don't need to make a reservation if you haven't been to Arlington Arts Center. We do have a pretty large space, and so we felt like, most of the time if you come, there's really only one or two other people there. There's a lot of room to spread out. We are requiring masks inside and social distancing. There's lots of hand sanitizer. So we hope you can come and see the shows while we're open. And also enjoy the talk tonight. So SOLOS is one of Arlington Arts Center's longest running programs. If you're not familiar with AAC, we have an exhibition program, an education program, and an artist residency program. And SOLOS is really one of the cornerstones of our exhibition program. We do a call once a year for artists to propose solo style shows in one of our 7 main gallery spaces, and we always have a couple outside jurors who select the artists through that call. For this year, the 2 jurors were Terrence Washington, who was previously at the National Gallery of Art and is now at Next Haven, a new residency and art space in New Haven, Connecticut. And then Michael Benevento, who's the director of Current Gallery, which is an artist-run space in Baltimore. So we really appreciate all of the work that the 2 of them did and all the thoughtfulness they put into selecting the artists for SOLOS this year. We are doing, this is the first of 2 talks. So the next talk this evening, we'll be talking with Anne-Claire Rogers and Kim Llerena and Tara Gupta. And then in 2 weeks, on November 12th, also on Thursday, 6 p.m., we'll be talking with Rebecca Rivas-Rogers, Constance Simon, and Heidi Zinizek about their SOLOS exhibitions. Okay, great. So the next artist we're going to speak with is Kim Llerena. Kim is a photographic artist currently based in Washington, D.C. She holds an MFA in photographic and electronic media from Maryland Institute College of Art and a BA in journalism from New York University. She was a flash forward emerging photographer selected by the Magenta Foundation in 2019, one of 100 photographers invited to participate in Center's Review Santa Fe in 2019, and a semifinalist in the Print Center's 90th Annual International Competition in 2016. She exhibits nationally in addition to serving as full-time faculty at American University. Kim, thanks for being here.
Thank you for organizing everything there. Thank you for starting us off too, Anne. I really enjoyed your talk. I will share my screen. Great. And it's wonderful to see so many familiar faces today. Thank you all for signing in and braving Zoom or spending even more time on Zoom than you already do. So my project that I finally got to put up at Arlington Arts Center, I know we're all really excited that we got to do that this fall, is called American Scrapbook. And I'll show you some images from it, both close-up and installation shots. Most of the images were made on a road trip in 2017. This was the third, what my friend and I like to call the biennial road trip that I took in 2017 and 2015 and 2013 preceding that trip with my best friend and fellow artist, Nancy Daly. Can Nancy say hi?
Hi.
I'm showing our map. So this is our map of places as we were in the planning stages of the road trip, and it took place in June and July 2017. The title American Scrapbook is a knowing nod to other documentary photo projects and books from photo history, primarily undertaken by, no surprise, white male photographers. Walker Evans' American Photographs, Stephen Shore's American Surfaces, Joel Sternfeld's American Prospects, and Robert Frank's The Americans. So I can't lie and say that those weren't huge inspirations for some of the imagery and the book format of the work. So it is called American Scrapbook, so I do envision it as a book. One day I will hopefully see it in published monograph form. So these are just a few images from a mock-up. And what I like when you lay it out in book form as opposed to on the wall is that you're able to, in both situations, you're able to force these new relationships between images, which I find, I think relates to the idea of a scrapbook when you force images next to each other, dependent on what they mean to you in your personal road trip or travel experience in book form. And then when they exist on a wall, they can take on these new groupings and new clusters. So the sequencing and the grouping of the work is really important for me to have viewers understand the work holistically. So these are some images of the work in book form as a mock-up. And all of the images depict fragments of the American experience. So individually, there are these small businesses and landmarks and even someone's backyard. Some are politically charged and some images are more mundane. And then the placement and the sequencing together, like I said, hopefully forges these new meanings and connections between them. And also highlights, for me, one of the most important parts of the work are the way that the visual images highlight various invisible systems that manifest themselves in our physical national landscape. Systems like business, infrastructure, religion, power, entertainment, racism, territory, money, food, etc. Dictated by these invisible forces, the marks of past actions and diverse quests for an American dream hopefully become potent symbols in our visual landscape. So this is an example of how they're installed at, or two portions of the wall are installed at Arlington Arts Center. And it was important to me to have this nonlinear exhibition format, different sizes, different positions on the wall. Sometimes I threw a little small 8x10 or 8x8 image like really high up to force you to get close to the wall and peer up at it as if it was actually a tree in nature or a sign, high above you on the road. And then some of the groupings and the pairings, some of them are thematic. So over on the left-hand side, towards the corner of the wall, are a lot of images as they lead into each other. They give you different depictions of home and domesticity. Some of the pairings and groupings are locational. So the two images in the center with the corn and Carhenge, which is a public art installation in Alliance, Nebraska, are both in Nebraska. And then some I'll point out later on are even, some of the groupings are more cheeky and semantic or have to do with little kind of inside jokes. The road trip, like I said, was taken between June and July of 2017. So parts of the project, I think, reflect a really specific moment between what you could argue, because they're in disparate locations around the United States, are unrelated events. So for instance, this is the Robert E. Lee, the former Robert E. Lee Monument in New Orleans, Louisiana, which was removed intact by official order and moved to an unknown location on May 19th, 2017. So literally a month before we arrived and took this picture, as Confederate monuments started coming down around the country. And then this image in Hemingford, Nebraska, there were a lot of towns, many towns in Nebraska and other parts of Middle America that were in the path of totality. So in the path of the total solar eclipse that happened on August 21st, 2017. So right after our road trip ended. So it was this interesting, some of these images or these interesting moments like caught between like the taking down of the monument and the occurrence of the eclipse in two completely different locations in the United States. So there is kind of, I think, this push and pull of some of the images being really temporally specific, time specific, as being markers of the middle of the summer of 2017. And there are these other images that hopefully counter that and provide timelessness, like a wall of corn that exists on a stretch of road on Route 92 in Nebraska. So these are some of those images. So the backs of people's homes showing nothing of note, nothing of historical note, no solar eclipse, no racist monuments being torn down, people existing and marking up their private spaces. And then a lot of the smaller images in the exhibition that were put sort of near the ground or up on the tops of walls are these seemingly untouched landscapes that sort of hint at the geological diversity of the United States. Like you have the plains and we have the red rocks of the Southwest and of course the corn and all of these different types of landscapes. But if you look deeper into the images, you realize that they're all not untouched. They're very much maintained or preserved. A lot of them are in national parks. So those are obviously well preserved. And this one has a fence running through it. And obviously a field of corn is a marker of agriculture and human interaction with the landscape. So these are the four walls of the exhibition. The idea would be that you enter this way and you start with the statement and that image, and then you would move clockwise around the 4.5 walls. In a lot of the images, there's the impression that something is missing. There's no people in any of the images. That's a little bit of there's two images with the backs of two people, very small in the photographs, but otherwise there's no people in the images except for how they're depicted in public art, like murals on the wall and that kind of thing. So in some of these images, there's the idea that something's missing from them because of maybe the lack of people, or because a lot of the images depict these fragments, these scraps of our landscape, scraps of things that people have left behind in ways in which we've interacted with the land, building it up or tearing it down. And I hope that quietness and that absence threads throughout these images and adds to the timeless quality of the whole series. It didn't necessarily have to have been made in the middle of the summer of 2017. And then this is how you would end ideally, and then it would take you back to the initial image. And then there's, as you go through, even though the images are not linearly arranged, there's all of these new relationships that hopefully, as you look up, down, and then left and right, you'll notice between, even between walls that are disconnected from each other. So now I just wanted to show a few, and there's captions at the bottom of these. I hope you can read them. I know Zoom doesn't give a super high res screen share, but these are some of the images larger up. And I did keep them in as kind of what I would imagine as book spreads for hopefully once this gets published as a book as well. So you have some of those images like the corn that I said were mundane, hopefully timeless, giving sort of environmental context, placing you in, this stretch of land on Route 92 East. Other images suggest a very specific past or history, as in one for a small business. There are a lot of images of small businesses that have been shuttered or that have failed and are now for rent. And others suggest a past, a very specific past, but also hopefully a future. So for this particular image, which if you're looking at the exhibition clockwise, is supposed to end the exhibition, this is obviously a Confederate flag with the middle torn out in North Carolina. And this is, I think, indicative of a lot of the images having an incomplete narrative. Photography is often seen as this truth-telling medium, but obviously we all know that photographs don't tell you the full story. So I don't know what happened before or after this photograph was taken. I don't know who cut that out. I'm hoping that the ambiguity of, was it a vandal, somebody driving by who didn't want to see the Confederate flag in front of someone's house? Or was it the owner who started to cut out the flag and then stopped short and left some of it up on its physical structure? I think that ambiguity contributes to this, like, the multiple possible meanings you could attach to this image. So you could read it as very chilling or very unnerving that this was left up, or you could read it as hopeful that somebody began to tear it down. Some of the images require more of a backstory or a longer title that I tried to do on the sheet that you hopefully carry around the exhibition. So this is one of my favorite moments on the road trip. This is one of the only interior shots in the show. It's called They Also Ran Gallery, and it's in Norton, Kansas, like 75 miles from the geographic center of the contiguous 48 United States. And it's at the top of a first state bank. And it's a gallery dedicated to presidential candidates that ran and lost, or who were defeated but not forgotten. And it's this really humble gallery. And you go around and you see all these black and white photographs of all these white men who lost their elections. Some of them obviously went on to win elections. You see Nixon there. And then when we were in the gallery, the last image was Hillary Clinton. So that's another, I think, instance of this could be taken at any point in time, but also was very specific to the middle of the summer of 2017. Some don't require as much backstory because of the recognizability of certain iconography in American culture. So this is Michael Jackson's childhood home. There's a memorial and people write little messages on the posts of the fence. And then this next sequence, I just wanted to show like a potential book sequence and how the opportunity for putting it in a linear book form opens up new relationships that are forced when the pages of a book exist, are viewed one after the other. And some of these relationships, the way I've positioned them are, some of them are formal, some of them are conceptual, some of them are both. And again, these are some of the these are small in the exhibition, but these are some of the landscapes, obviously in a national park, but the seemingly untouched landscapes that kind of punctuate the exhibition and ground you. Like the image of the ripped Confederate flag, there's a lot of these images of gaps or incomplete structures that hint at things that didn't work, futility, moments of national failure. So this is the flood wall on top of the levee right near in St. Bernard Parish, bordering New Orleans, Louisiana. And this is a gap. If you can see, the top of the wall doesn't meet the bottom of the wall, the Mexican border wall in Jacumba, California. These are advertisements for Culligan water. The text is a little small. JP Solar against the backdrop of the California drought. This is a coal-fired power plant that is on Navajo Nation. It's recently been decommissioned. As of 2019, they ceased commercial generation after the rise of fracking made natural gas, caused natural gas power prices to fall and to fall under the cost of coal power. And so they're eventually it affected them, and they decommissioned this power plant. And then these are two of the last images, just a wall in Calexico, California, right on the border of Mexico, and then the Mexican border wall running through Calexico, California. So on the other side of, this is California, and then on the other side of the wall is Mexico. So the combination, I feel like, of these mundane images with the more mundane or domestic images with the more politically charged or punchy kind of images, hopefully present a fuller picture of the American experience, or hopefully the experience of a range of American citizens and residents. And so these are just a few of the clusters that I particularly enjoy. On the corner, these are the two images of the Mexican border wall, or the wall, and then the Mexican border wall in Calexico. And then this is Our Lady of Guadalupe, who is the Mexican image of a Mexican Catholic image of the Virgin Mary, and that's in Austin, Texas. And then this tiny little image here is then Selena, who is obviously a deceased, a sadly deceased pop singer who was of Mexican, she was a Mexican-American and also had Cherokee heritage. And then this is the MJ picture, so it goes from Selena to MJ. So these are some of the relationships I wanted to highlight there. And then these are a few of this is Crater Lake and this is Eclipse. So they were both celestial bodies. They're not potatoids, but they're other celestial or space-themed images. And then this is the Robert E. Lee Monument. And then this is Monument Valley on the border of Arizona and Utah, part of Navajo Nation. So there were some hopefully cheeky moments in there that bring a bit of levity to some of the other more somber images in the show. I think that's where I'll stop sharing for now. Oh, it's so good to see faces again.
Thanks so much, Kim. I'm going to start off with a question someone posted right near the beginning. They were wondering, and I was actually also wondering, how much planning you do. So with the road trip, you know, if you knew you were going to particular places, did you have images you sort of wanted to get, or places you knew you wanted to photograph, or was it more serendipitous, or is it sort of a combination?
This one was more serendipitous. Typically, I work in a much more rigid, planned out way. And then on this trip, I just gave myself sort of permission to shoot a lot and bring it back. And the rolls of film that weren't ruined when it got back, long story. I decided, it actually took probably about a year to look through all of them and decide what I actually had, what I had really noticed on the trip, and how I could thread them all together in a way that really said something about our travels and like the American condition at this present moment.
And then I was also wondering, you touched on this a little bit, but there is this balance in the series between these sort of big dramatic landscapes or places that are really specific markers of a place, like the MJ, Michael Jackson's birthplace, and then others that are really subtle. So you showed us an image of a backyard in California really early on, and it's sort of things that are a little more everyday. What are you looking for in those quieter images, or like what draws you to those?
I hope that they give people a bit of a respite from the more politically charged ones. Like there is a reason, obviously, that the torn Confederate flag is the largest size that I have in the show, and it's the one that I hope ends the show. But I didn't want, obviously there's too much going on in this country for me to effectively do a show that's overtly political, and I would do a terrible job at that. And so those images to me are more about pulling the series away from the more heavy-handed images and pulling it more towards the this is our country as well. People have backyards and they live in the desert and they build up their private spaces in these really personal ways.
And a couple people have questions about what you're imagining for the book. So if you would include additional text to give context about the particular sites, and also sort of what the narrative you imagine would be, sort of how you would create that narrative, or how much of it would sort of be left a little more open like it is in the exhibition.
Yeah, I have the mock-up of the book, like, I make little tweaks here and there, but I don't envision much more text. I might have a few instances where I explain things like the They Also Ran gallery, and sometimes you have to make sure that people, I think, understand that empty pedestal was a very specific Confederate general. It's not just some like it's kind of unrecognizable without more context textually. But I didn't want it to be too pedantic, so I didn't envision much more besides maybe some longer captions for a few of them, and maybe laying it out in more of a scrapbook format where the sequencing says more than the captions do, I think.
We have another question from Llerena asking, how do you think your gender and race have added or changed the sort of quote American road trip photos that we have been used to seeing in photography with the people you mentioned?
Yeah, I know. I think, thanks, Lena. She's got me. Yeah, so much of what Lena and I teach in photo history is the voice of straight white men, which is it's not just photography, it's plenty of artistic media and plenty other, other cultural spaces in this country. And, I suppose by being a female who is shooting this work, I don't think anything in it is inherently indicative of the gender or race of myself as the photographer. I actually wanted to be very absent from the work. Like I wouldn't, none of the sequencing has to do with like the order in which we took the road trips, and hopefully myself as the author is divorced from the way I've shot the work. All I can do is hope to add, a female voice who is aware of the photo history who came before her, as a professor of photo history and an enthusiast. Add that voice to the big C conversation. I hate that word. To add it to the conversation, and I don't think that answers Lena's question, but I do appreciate it. And there's a reason that I mentioned those people who came before me as people that I respect. And I have no problem with the fact that Robert Frank and Walker Evans are straight white men. It's just worth noting as our field becomes more diverse in many ways. I think it's worth noting or recognizing the identities of who came before us.
We have another question from Andy about, you used the phrase, I think a few times, the seemingly untouched landscape. And he's asked, could you describe a bit behind the scenes of what you actually touched? Which I wonder if he's asking if you made changes to the landscape or sort of staged things before you photographed them.
Mm-hmm. I did not.
Okay.
There's also a rich history of that in photo history as well. I did not, but I sort of meant that I got back and sort of didn't know if I was going to include all these images of landscapes like the, waterfall with the rainbow and all of these, the mountains, that's my background right now. Because I didn't think that they fit, because so much of what I'm interested in is our human, our constructed relationship to the landscape. I'm, going back to photo history, the New Topographics show of 1975, photographs of a man-altered landscape was obviously very much present in my mind as I was shooting these and arranging them. But then when I realized that all of them are very touched, that they're part of national parks that are very, very much maintained by the human hand, many human hands, I think that influenced their inclusion in the rest of the work, which is very much about what we do to and within the landscape lasts and manifests itself visually in the landscape. And our actions within these systems that I mentioned in the beginning, these systems of infrastructure and business and commerce and racism and territory and all of these things, and how they're invisible, but the mark that they leave on the landscape is permanent.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna do one more question. It's kind of a combined question. A couple of people are interested in if you see yourself as the curator of the space / exhibition, and also just in general, I think how you see your role sort of throughout someone was asking about the roughly year-long curation process. So that sounds more like a question about, I guess both things being a question about how you sort of narrowed down the selection, and then how you made choices about how the work would flow and exist in the space, which, with our SOLOS program, we usually are expecting artists to really they do sort of act as their own curator. I always feel like I'm giving feedback as people need it, but for the most part, they're really sort of curating the show themselves. And you'd obviously given a lot of thought already to what the series was and how it would look in book form, and sort of laying it all out. So
the folks in the chat asking these questions, and anybody else in this chat who knows me knows that I'm extremely obsessive to a fault, and I overthink literally everything. And Nancy's laughing. Nancy's saying, no, not at all. She hasn't dealt with that a bit. And so I will, the book sometimes I'll just I'll obsess for weeks over something, and then the book I'll change the order of one image. And I'm like, Kim, what did you do? Why did you spend so much time thinking about these two images? No one's going to notice. So I made, I don't know, for the year-long curation process, I made these, I could show them, but they would be scary. I made these Adobe Illustrator mock-ups that were, to scale mock-ups of the exhibition space. And then I just put little photo thumbnails in them and move them all around 1,500 times and then by the time I got into the space, I showed them to you, Blair, and then Nancy and Rex were helping me install, and I still wasn't done organizing them on the wall. So sometimes I just had to, I think the short answer is Nancy and Rex just had to look at them and be like, okay, you're done now. This is the arrangement, because otherwise I would have just continued to switch things around. Not sure if that's an appropriate answer.
Great, cool. Thank you, Kim. It was really great to hear you talk about the work.
Thanks so much, Blair.
Mhm.
Thanks, everybody.